Hi, everybody, and welcome to this fantastic panel discussion today. I am Ginger Siegel, and I lead small business for all of North America for Mastercard, and we're very, very excited to be joining the SANS group today.
Great. Thank you so much. So to start us out, I wanted to just ask the question to both of you, and Ginger, I think I'll pose it to you first. What does the cyber threat landscape for small businesses look like today?
Well, Max, it's not only a great question, but it's a super important one. You know, a lot of people, when they think about cyber security and cyber attacks, they think about the big companies. But the landscape, particularly since COVID, has really changed. And roughly 50% of all cyber attacks are actually happening on small businesses today. And this has really continued to grow as more and more small businesses have digitized. A couple other stats out there that 61% of small businesses have already experienced at least one threat. And part of the problem is because small businesses don't have a lot of resources, very often their response is reactive versus proactive. And in fact, when these cyber attacks happen, about 83% of small businesses are not financially prepared to survive the attack, simply because the average cost of a cyber attack is between, let's say, $100,000 and $200,000. So we see the landscape changing dramatically, particularly when it comes to small business.
Thank you very much. I just want to be sure I heard correctly. Did you say over 50% of attacks are aimed at small
Over
business?
50%, yes. And actually, and then 61% have actually experienced one, which is a very big number. And the problem is because of the large cost related to some of these attacks, particularly around ransomware, many of these small businesses just can't survive, because I would say about 95% of all small businesses are under $1 million in revenue. And so if it's going to cost them up to $200,000, let's say, you can see how detrimental that could be to their survival.
Devastating. What are some examples either of you would like to share on how an attack, whether it's financial or otherwise, can impact a small business? Any kind of real world examples you're able to share?
Yeah, I mean, I have one that constantly comes to my mind, but I would say in general, one of the biggest, I would say, impacts is financially. I know of a doctor's practice down in Florida. They'd been in practice for 15 years, very substantial practice, very, very successful, a pillar of the community. And they were attacked with ransomware for a significant sum of money, took over their records. And you can imagine for a physician, the importance of their records and patient privacy. And it literally put this doctor out of business after a 15-year run. So there's a lot of examples out there, but I would say, from a financial perspective, that's one of the biggest impacts. The other big impact is reputational. Small businesses have customers, and there's huge reputational risk, particularly if a small business loses records or has breaches. It can really, especially if that gets out, it can really impact how these small businesses are viewed, and perhaps create a fear for doing business with them, particularly as more and more small businesses are actually online, doing more social media. So it's a pretty powerful thing that can actually hurt them terribly.
Absolutely.
And sadly, 60% of the small businesses that suffer a cyber attack go out of business within 6 months. It's a really scary statistic, because that, compounded with the fact that about half of those attacks are on small business. That's not good.
No, Gina, you're so right. And what's important about what Gina just said, Max, is that small businesses employ over 50% of the population. And so when we see small businesses go out of business, it's not just detrimental to the business itself and their employees and their families. It's detrimental to the community, and it's really detrimental to the overall economy as well.
Yeah, the reverberations of that impact go much further than I think we all realize.
Exactly.
Yeah. It affects a lot of families.
Yeah, and related to that, I think reports of cyber attacks on large companies or government entities are reported in the news most consistently. For example, Samsung, TikTok, were hacked last year, and user database records were impacted significantly and stolen. But as you just alluded to, we don't hear as much about cyber attacks on small businesses and the reverberations of that impact. So do you feel that small businesses are at risk of experiencing a cyber attack in terms of where hackers focus their activity just as much as large companies?
Absolutely, because one of the things about the news is going to report on the biggest things that they can report on. So when they hear of, big attacks on Samsung and TikTok and Target back in the day, that's big dollar and name brands that we know. And so that resonates with a lot more people than if it's Joe's Pizza Shop that, people may not have heard of. It's, localized.
And, Max, I'll just add one thing on to Gina's point is that the problem with this is that exactly to what Gina said, because they're not publicized, many small businesses don't take it seriously because they don't believe that it's going to impact them until it's too late. And actually, about 80% of small businesses don't do anything until they have an attack, and then sometimes it is too late. So it's really difficult because they're not put out there in the news, but we know that the underpinning, the end result is going to be catastrophic, especially compared to some of the larger companies. Certainly, we don't want this to happen to anybody, but small businesses don't have the foundation, the capital cushion to protect them if something does happen.
Right. And obviously,
Yeah.
Given the impact, the lack of attention that it gets is almost a deterrent to small business to invest in cybersecurity. So what do you think can be done to raise more awareness, whether it's through media or other avenues among small businesses about, and communities and government policymakers about the impact of cybersecurity attacks on small businesses and how they affect others?
Webinars like this are a really good starting point. Because anyone that listens, it has a ripple effect. They tell two friends who tell two friends who tell two friends, and then the message goes out there. And part of that message needs to be that there are a lot of free resources out there that are designed specifically to help small businesses secure their business.
Yeah, I would just add on exactly to what Gina said that, Gina and I do spend a fair amount of our time doing these kinds of webinars. And certainly, Max, your organization is a pillar to really provide support and put the wind at the back of small businesses. But for me, this is all about education. And so if we can get on these types of webinars and spread the word with large numbers of participants, and then they spread the word beyond that, I think that's number one. But then it's not just about that. It's exactly what Gina said, which is there's tools. And people don't, it's important not to just listen to a webinar, but then what actions are you going to take when you get off that webinar? And I think, our job is, in a sense, to make people afraid and to really make people understand the potential severity of this. And so these kinds of things are absolutely invaluable.
And to add on to, make them afraid, yeah, we have to, because it has to be a real and present danger. But we also share information that empowers them with fairly simple steps that, as long as they're diligent with these, will make a big difference. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So on that note, in terms of, taking something from the webinar to both spread information, but also take action, what should small businesses do to protect themselves from a cyber attack? What types of attacks are they facing most often? And how do they protect from them?
That's a very good question. So cyber attacks, 91% of cyber attacks are based on human error. It's, the mistakes that we make, and it's some of the simple stuff. And we'll talk about that, with passwords and phishing and those kind of things. But the great opportunity for small businesses that we can help them get empowered to change that human behavior change the human error by changing human behavior in fairly simple ways, and that aren't expensive either. And so we'll get into today use of safe passwords and multi-factor authentication, how to avoid phishing attempts, and like the simple things like using those USB thumb drives, whatever you want to call them, more carefully, or using a different data source. So there are more things that we can talk about.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing on as well to what Gina said. It's making sure that employees change their behavior, employers, but also employees, because it's really important that, even if there's just one other employee, that they're really taking the time to understand what the potential implications are, of some of these errors. And, we see it all the time. And the other thing to think about is that there are tools out there, such as monitoring tools to alert small businesses to what is going on in the dark web. There are assessment tools to help small businesses to really understand what their baseline is. And I know Gina will also speak to some of that as well, but it's behavior, and it's also taking action immediately.
That's great. And I think a few times today in different capacities, speakers have talked about kind of best practices and the importance of implementing them. If you think about kind of those best practices, not carelessly using USBs or whatever it may be, what advice would you give on how to actually, to a small business owner or manager, on how they actually work with their employees besides saying, don't do this, to get them to take on those best practices and turn them into actions and behavior?
It comes down to education. And if the employees understand the risks that can be caused by their errors or behavior, then they should, I hope, have a vested interest in the success of this business, that they really care about it. And the things that they need to do are fairly simple.
Yeah, and I would just say the other major best practice is be alert. I think we all get into a zone where we're on our computers and we see something come through and we automatically click on it. And, to Gina's point about phishing, which is one of the top ways that bad actors get into our stuff. And so I think it's taking a step to stop. I was talking to one of our great cyber experts, and, something that she said to me was, she said, that you get a lot of emails in a day. If there's emails where you don't necessarily know, she said, just put them in a folder when you have time and then go back and go through them. And I thought that was really great advice, so that that you have to go through them, but you do it when you're in a different mindset and, just pushing through the work. So I think it's really taking the time to assess the situation, and then you begin to learn what doesn't look right.
And we get all kinds of, as employees, cybersecurity training. And one that has really stuck in my brain is, do I know you like that? It's questioning whether it's an email, it's a text message, or even a phone call. And do I know you like that? And if I know you for what the information that you want to share, or the things you want me to click on, attachments and links, is that really appropriate for this person with me? And that can be one of those, if you have questions about, send it over that folder that Ginger just mentioned.
Excellent. Any other best practices with respect to education, awareness among the employees that, you'd like to share, or best practices you feel are kind of a must do or must implement for a small business?
I have about 6 areas that I can cover with best practices, but then also resources as well. So do you want me to take off with that?
Let's go with it.
Okay, just interrupt me if I'm getting too enthusiastic and going on too much. But the first area is really safe passwords, because think of your passwords as the key to your digital fortress, right? And if someone gets that key, your password, then you've got a breach in your security wall, right? And so the things that you should do and don't do, I'll give you both. So first, what you should do, you should create passwords or paraphrases that are 8 to 16 or more characters long, and you use lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And so the longer it is and the more varied it is with the kind of symbols and numbers and such that's in it, the stronger it is. You want to change your passwords every 3 months, or immediately if you're hacked. or if you see that you're at risk. It's a lot to remember all of the passwords you have out there, because in today's connected world, we have a password for everything. So use a reliable password manager. And very important is to enable two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And that's where you have, say on your phone, and you put in a password with, some vendor or somebody that you use, and they send you a text message or an email with a code that you then enter into that site. That is matching your password with you as a person, putting them together and say, okay, let them in. Without that multi-factor authentication, anybody who steals your password can go out there and have a lot of fun with it in a way that you don't want. Now, the things that you don't do is don't use the same password for everything, ever. And I've had family members that I've had to coach on this myself. You cannot do that. And 50% of people use the same password for all of their logins. So that means in this digital fortress, you've got a lot of doors and they all have the same key. When somebody gets that password, they can get in from a lot of places. Also, don't share your password with others, and don't write down your passwords in a list and tape them on the underside of your desk drawer. I was just watching a movie this last week, and that's what somebody did to be able to hack into all these financial accounts. So that stuck with me. So then moving on to phishing. As I mentioned, 91% of cyber attacks are caused by phishing. And what that leads to is stolen data, malware, viruses, ransomware, and such. And so phishing can come in multiple forms. It can come, there's a lot of forms of it, but the main three that I think of are email phishing, and then smishing, which is SMS phishing, which is texting, and also vishing, which is voicemail phishing. So what the things that you should do is look for inaccuracies in email addresses, fake looking logos from companies, misspellings, just like Ginger said, if you find something you're not quite sure, either delete it immediately or put it into that file for you to do a little bit more investigation. If it's an unfamiliar sender who is asking for data, ask your question, do I know this person like that? Pitch it. Also, delete suspicious emails and then empty your trash, and then let your employees know that you got this suspicious email, because they may have their email addresses too, and send it to them. And if something like this happens, then look up the customer service phone number on the provider's website and call customer service. And what was happening to me personally is I kept getting a series of phone calls on my cell phone from Apple that it wasn't a familiar number. So I just kept not looking at, answering them. But then I called Apple from their customer service. I said, do you call people? They said, no, we don't call people when there's an issue. So again, I don't know you like that, Apple. What you don't do is don't open attachments or click on links within emails unless you know the sender. Don't forward suspicious emails to other people. Only opens that door wider. And don't send financial information and personal identifying information through emails if there's a way that can help it, because it should be all within a secure system. Okay, so third one is, I already mentioned, so I'll just say it quickly: USB, thumb drives, memory sticks, removable media. 27% of malware infections and viruses come from an infected USB. So say you're walking into your business and you see a thumb drive on the ground outside your business. You pick it up and you go plug it into your computer to see if you can figure out whose it is. And all of a sudden you're infected with a virus. If you find a USB, just crush it, destroy it, and throw it away. And don't lose yours. Don't leave it laying around, and lock up your USBs. And what you should also not do, don't use giveaway USBs. I've been to conferences before where they give you a USB that's branded to them. You just never know. And maybe the company was fine, but some malicious employee went and loaded it with a virus. And so don't lose your USBs. So that's the beginning of the journey into cybersecurity advice. But you can see none of that is really hard. It's a matter of communicating that to employees and taking those actions yourself and keeping it up.
And I just, Gina, those are fantastic. And I just wanted to add one more that people may not think about. You know, we talked about the fact that small businesses don't have a lot of resources. They don't have chief risk officers, marketing officers, and small businesses, the owners do it all. They are the chief cook, bottle washer. Very often there might be a task where they might say, oh, you know what, here's my password. You know, why don't you just look it up for me? I think you have to be very mindful, even within your organization, that it's not that you can't trust your employees, but you never know who your employees know. And you have to think about every person that gets some piece of information about your business. It could be a piece of information that travels like the game of telephone. And so I think it's important that for those business owners out there who do get, it's exhausting to run a business, and it's a lot easier sometimes to try to cut corners, but it's really important that you know and think about where the information not only is, but where it could get to. So Max, I just wanted to add that in because I think it's a common thing that happens just because lack of time.
Oh, 100%. Many years ago, before joining SANS, I can attest that I worked at small businesses where executives, of which there weren't many, would share passwords with junior level staff to go and complete tasks via their email for them. And those passwords were likely used for, you know, other access to other sensitive systems or.
That's right.
Yeah, that is correct. And, you know, you have to think about too, as a small business owner, are you and or your employees using personal devices to do work business? So at Mastercard, work is work, personal is personal, completely separate. We can't, you know, there's all kinds of rules about, you know, how we can use, you know, our technology, which is great. We're a completely locked down, secure company. But that may not happen with a small business. They may not be able to afford to give all their employees a cell phone, for example, or if they need iPads to do certain kind of business, even computers. And so your weakest link can take down your whole business, and it may not be even something you've thought about.
Yeah, and I think Gina's point is spot on, because certainly Mastercard is a large company that is incredibly protected and has very significant resources and security. And we have some of the top people in the industry, but small businesses don't, they can't. And so they have to really double down on thinking twice about every single thing they do. And I think that kind of business and personal is a really, really good point. I can't think of too many small businesses that have those kinds of rules, just because they don't necessarily even have an HR department or a technology department. So Gina, I think those are really good points.
Thank you.
So, you know, in terms of best practices, I know you went through several and you might have a couple more to bring up at some point, but coming back to that small business owner, you know, who does have multiple hats to wear, what are the other actions outside of kind of incorporating best practices across the organization that, you know, as an owner, you feel they need to take to improve cybersecurity?
They have to be the cyber leader. So that means that they really need to learn about those best practices and communicate them and follow up. If they don't feel that they have the time or the expertise to do that, it's more time, because you can learn all of it. If they have an employee that's really good with technology or even moderately good with technology, they can assign that person to be the cyber leader and be the one that is responsible for teaching others.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And then I think the other thing is always get up every morning and assume something bad could happen. I think that being prepared and assuming the worst from the minute that you wake up is really important because it puts you on a certain sense of alert so that you are more careful versus going into your day just assuming today's just going to be another day. And I think that vigilance is critically important.
Great insight. So let's say you are a small business owner wearing that hat as cyber leader, or you have someone you've designated that to, but you're working with them, and the horrible happens. You are the victim of a cyber attack. How do you respond? Do you notify anyone? Like, what are your steps 1, 2, and 3?
Okay, so ideally in advance, you have created an incident response plan. And what that is that it's preparing for a possible future incident. So, and you have to make sure that everyone in your company knows about the plan and is ready that if something happens. And there is a template on the Cyber Readiness Institute website that helps to design that. But so in responding to a cyber attack, you need to inform all the employees that they must shut down all of their devices immediately. Don't send any emails, don't do anything on your devices. In fact, also disconnect from the internet and intranet if there's an internal network by turning off Wi-Fi and unplugging your cable. And then contact your internet service provider. And then if you happen to have the luxury of having a managed service provider for your IT or your IT service provider, then contact them as well. And then if you have cyber insurance, contact that provider also. Now, if you have an attack, then there are government agencies in Canada and the US, and also there's one international that I'll tell you about. So in Canada, there is the Canada Center for Cybersecurity, and they want you to report cyber breaches. Also in the United States, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has an Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3, and again, they take and want these complaints filed with them. If you suffer a ransomware attack, then go to nomoreransom.org. Make sure it's the .org. Sometimes it comes out as No More Ransom Project, but this is a nonprofit organization globally, and their mission is to stop ransomware in their tracks. So they have hundreds of decryption codes so that if you have encrypted files that you can see them, but you can't get to them because they're encrypted, then they have keys that could quite possibly unencrypt those so that you can get back your data. So those are just 3, but it is good to report.
Ginger, anything you'd like to add in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing, I think those are exactly the right steps, but the one I would add is, once this all happens, what are you going to do to avoid the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? So I think that once this happens and you've used all of these great resources that Gina has talked about, it is critical that you really look to see what are the very specific changes that you need to make in your business. And maybe, Max, I know we were going to talk about this, but maybe this is a good time to bring in the fact that one of the areas that's really coming up a lot is the opportunity for small businesses to get cyber insurance, which is very, very critical at this point, because if we know that the top reason that cyber attacks get people is based on the financial gain that these bad actors want, the financial gain has to come from a financial loss, and that usually is going to be the business that this happens to. And for example, we have a cyber bundle. We focus a lot on education, which Gina talked about. We have tools that will actually help a small business assess the vulnerability of their sites. And then we also have a 24/7 monitoring system that'll monitor the dark web. But we also offer insurance through an organization called HSB. And without getting into the details of the insurance, it's certainly something that can be looked up. There's a range of coverages that you possibly can get, things like data breach, fraud, identity theft, losses in terms of computer attacks, a system failure, and just general liability. And I think one of the top areas where people suffer is through ransomware. We see a lot of ransomware on the personal side. My mother was attacked and had a ransomware attack on her computer. And so I think that protecting yourself after this happens, really understanding the why, and then trying to fill all the holes that might have allowed this to happen in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's super helpful. And Gina, I'll let you jump in if you'd like on insurance to hear your perspective on it, because it was a topic of a panel earlier, but I think hearing the perspective of, two individuals representing two leaders at a corporation that works with all these small businesses, how do you see, many small businesses serve larger entities, whether they're corporations, government organizations. How do you see the lens and the perspective on a small business that has cyber insurance versus one that doesn't when it comes to kind of, trusting in their cybersecurity preparedness or incident response planning?
So one of the things about cyber insurance is that I think you're less likely to fall victim to one of those that goes out of business because of a cyber attack, because you have that backup. So say that you're sued by somebody whose data is stolen from you. That whole recovery is expensive. Cyber insurance often covers cyber breach investigations so that they can dig in to see why it happened, how it happened, and that helps to prevent it elsewhere. So it does give you that layer of protection. And the statistics say that a business is more likely to have a cyber attack than a flood or a fire. So we get that insurance on physical space. We have it on our homes, you have it on businesses, but not as much on cyber insurance. And one plug I'll make is that if you are a Mastercard credit card holder for a personal card, we have ID theft protection, identity theft protection. And I signed up for it. I put in all kinds of information about myself. You can put, social security numbers and bank account numbers and all kinds of things, other credit card numbers, and it will give you alerts. So if I was getting alerts, and I'm embarrassed to say that I had some old passwords that I'd actually reused the password on more than one account. They identified that for me. I went in there and fixed it and added two-factor authentication. And some of these accounts were old and I hadn't gone into them for a long time, so I didn't remember that I'd used them before.
Yeah, and I'll just add just a little plug also. We also have ID theft protection on our small business cards, as well as a great partnership that we have with like a McAfee. So we have partners that actually we bring to the table to support our cardholders in a number of different ways on both the consumer and small business side. But separate from that, the most important thing is partnering with organizations like yours, Max, to really perpetuate the need for education on this topic, and really to bring to the forefront, this is not something that just happens to other people, but it happens to a lot of people and businesses. And so it's really critically important.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to move into our last couple questions before we go to the audience questions. So, spoke a lot about education, getting information out there. What resources do you recommend small business owners check out to learn more about securing their business?
So we have the Mastercard Trust Center, and if I may share my screen for just a moment. There we go. Okay, so this is the Mastercard Trust Center, and this provides free cybersecurity education, resources, and tools designed to help small businesses improve the security of their business. And what is unique about this experience is that it does not matter what level of cybersecurity expertise you have, you can find materials that fit your needs. So if you're someone who doesn't know very much about cybersecurity and is pretty overwhelmed by it, you can start at this learning journey called Learn the Basics. If you know the basics, and you want to learn more, you can expand your knowledge. And if you are pretty knowledgeable about it, but you know you need to keep up with what's going on, then you can master your security. So the sites, each of the learning journeys has 3 content areas: cybersecurity core concepts, cyber attack methods, and help protect your business. And you can see the way that we post the information. So it's in videos, podcasts, white papers, infographics, and such, different ways to get that information. And then, I don't want to make anybody dizzy, we do offer some featured content from Mastercard. This is Dr. J's Mastering Cyber podcast. It's 1.5 minutes long. We've got them peppered throughout the whole site, and they are super informational and very engaging. And we also have a resources and solutions page. And this is our US site. So this is where you can learn about cyber insurance from our partner, HSB, and it's available for purchase within the US. Give some, and you can learn about and get a quote. And there's a, you can actually get, the premium quote. This is Digital Doors. This is Ginger's. She's going to show us this in just a moment. And then you can go to Mastercard's Entrepreneur's Odyssey, another free resource. And this helps you learn how to start a business, grow it, and continue to develop your business over time. Plus, you can join a small business community to talk with other people who are small business owners. All free, very video based. And then I mentioned the Cyber Readiness Institute. They have the Cyber Readiness Program, they have a Cyber Readiness Starter Kit, and they have a Cyber Leaders Certificate Program. So you can just click here, all free. It's a nonprofit we support. We also support the Global Cyber Alliance, and they have their cyber security toolkit. It has education materials, but it also has real tools that you can use at no charge. And it has a lot of articles and such. So this is the Trust Center.
Yep.
Excellent. And you just mentioned it there. I don't know if you want to just bring it back up, the Digital Doors. I saw other resources.
Yeah, maybe you can bring that up, Gina. And I can just tell everyone we're super excited about Mastercard Digital Doors. You can just Google that. And we built this when COVID happened, but we found out that over 30% of small businesses did not have a digital online presence. And so what we did is build Digital Doors as a way to help small businesses get online, accept payments, for example, on like tap on phone. We have a wonderful curriculum on things like social media marketing. We have a digital diagnostic test, which will help you identify areas, either financial areas, operations, safety and security, where you actually will take a test with 17 questions. You'll get a score and we'll benchmark you against other businesses, but we'll also give you a path to fix that. And this is free. And then we're really excited. And yeah, you can see here the digital health scoring, which is a wonderful tool. And we also now have partners like FedEx that provide big discounts, Marquez, which is a really great dashboard of information that you can save and use when you apply for different loans and things. And then, of course, a lot of related content, particularly on cybersecurity is a big area. But it's a wonderful way to provide support, help you get online, help you stay online, how to develop websites. And so we are really thrilled. We're lucky to partner with Gina and her team to have some of these great resources. But again, it's free. I would highly recommend those that are listening to take a spin. And now we have just added a complete marketing hub where you can actually design your own ads, level up your marketing skills. It's a very advanced play to provide tools to help you acquire new customers, create an influencer program. And this was just added in the last couple weeks. So again, Mastercard Digital Doors, and most importantly for this session today, some great connectivity into cyber curriculum, which is very important as we've discussed, Max.
Absolutely, no, and thank you for sharing that. So I'm gonna pivot now to questions that we've gotten in the Slack. One was actually a comment, but I'd like to see if either of you would like to reply to it. Benny said, well, it might always sound easy to shut down systems. It's kind of also important to preserve the evidence when you think about containing the incident. I wanted to see if you've seen any of that in your work with small businesses or had any comments there.
From my experience, I haven't worked with individual businesses, but I do know that that is one of the things that we definitely recommend. And one thing that's really important is that you back up your data on a regular basis. And the cadence, the frequency that you back up the data depends on how much data you can afford to be without. Because if you get hit by a ransomware attack and you've lost your data, that shuts you down until, especially if you have online commerce and such, but also with your vendors. So back up your data frequently, and also update or patch all of your software and your operating systems on a regular basis too, because that also helps prevent cyber attacks, because companies know that they find holes in their programming, and those patches or updates are designed to plug those holes. And the fraudsters know that when they find them, if someone hasn't patched, then they can go attack them even on something that's been corrected.
Yeah, I think Gina answered the question beautifully. I guess the only thing I would add is just double clicking on something she said, which is very often we're on our computers and these updates come through and we press do it later, and later never comes. And to Gina's point, these are sent for a reason. So I think that backing up the data and making sure you stay absolutely vigilant on the updates. We have to as well here at Mastercard. So I strongly suggest that and agree with Gina.
And that's for your business and your personal.
That's right.
That's great. Thank you. So another question, I think this ties back to kind of not just education of the current, small business ecosystem, but those who might be in it in the future. What are your thoughts about starting cyber education at the upper high school level? And this person wrote that, targeting the future generations that will be leaders, small business owners, and the workforce, providing them education. I wanted to see what you thought of that idea.
I think it should start before the upper high school level. You look at middle schoolers who go online, even, and they have cell phones younger and younger, even down to elementary school. So there are different levels that you can educate. But it's definitely something there should be the curriculum in the schools at the level that is appropriate for the ages that they're educating.
Yeah, I completely agree with Gina. First of all, I can't believe the age that some kids have cell phones now. I just saw a 5-year-old with the cell phone. I thought, oh, wow. But the education is important, but also a positive thing is this is a very, very thriving industry on both the bad side and the good side. So I think the more we educate, this could be a wonderful career path for a lot of students as they're thinking about what they want to do. Overall safety and security is something that's front and center in so many organizations today. It could be in the private sector, it could be in government. So aside from the fact that children need to understand that there's bad things out there, it also could be a great path for them for their future.
Absolutely.
In fact, there's a huge shortage of professionals in the cybersecurity field. And I know SANS Institute really knows that and has great programs, degree programs and certificate programs in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. No, there are, different programs for the workforce, for those that are security awareness professionals, or even in academia with our SANS.edu side. I did want to come back to a couple of final questions. I'm going to give myself a 2-minute warning for the three of us. But a question from Benny was that, what are some of the security areas that, banks or financial institutions focus on to integrate their systems with businesses, perhaps sometimes small businesses who are running credit checks from their website? And she added on by saying, well, I understand that banks and businesses have to work together to fill out questionnaires, or run credit checks or do checklists to integrate systems, are there any types of platforms or tools that can be used to check the security posture of organizations, be it the bank or the credit check company or the small business vendor?
Well, first piece of advice I have related to the credit checks is freeze your accounts. I froze TransUnion, Experian, and I can't remember the other one. I froze them, and I can unfreeze them with a couple of clicks on their website when I know I've applied for a credit card or some kind of a loan, and then I refreeze it. But that way, if someone fraudster goes out there and tries to get a credit card or buy a car with your information that they've stolen, they can't get a credit report and they can't unfreeze it. So that helps. And Mastercard has a tremendous number of tools that banks utilize to help fight fraud and to secure their systems. And I'm not versed in all the specifics, but I do know that we have that in place. So it depends on if it's a bank that's working with Mastercard.
Yeah, Gina, I'll just add that's absolutely true. So our clients are banks and fintechs and all the people that serve small businesses. So we do ensure that our customers have the availability of all of the great tools and solutions that we have, either through things we've developed, through companies that we've acquired. But cyber and overall fraud protection is of the utmost importance to Mastercard and to our clients.
In fact, the reason why we call it the Mastercard Trust Center is because we know that without trust in commerce and in pretty much anything, things stop there. And Ginger made a great point early on, is that if a business suffers a cyber attack, they start to lose the trust, or immediately, maybe sometimes lose the trust of their customers. It's really about cybersecurity that creates that trust.
Absolutely. So on that note, wanted to wrap up here, but leave you both the opportunity to share your final thought. And just what is one thing you want every attendee to take away from your session, if you can include that as you give us your final thoughts here.
I mean, I can think it, for me, it's an easy one, which is take this seriously. Use this as a springboard to go into your systems, to analyze where you might have gaps, and don't wait till tomorrow because the bad guys aren't.
That's exactly right. And take these, what are really fairly easy steps to secure your business, and eat that apple one bite at a time. Do one and move on. Make sure your passwords are secure. Then make sure that you have two-factor authentication. Just keep eating until that apple's down to the core and you've got it.